What makes a great story?
I love the way you ask these questions. They're just like, here's this question I prepared earlier that is going to get to the heart of all the issues, all the questions I have. Okay, for me, a great story. I almost want to break this question into two.
Okay.
The escapist great story, as in Star Wars, Star Trek, James Bond, spectacle movies, you know, the Bourne movies, which I love, all these things. Those are roller coaster ride, escapist stories, Jaws, you know, all these things. Well, Jaws not so much maybe, because Jaws actually has some interesting stuff in there going on. But the other movies, all that. But you can have these escapist movies, and if those are great stories, they can be great stories. Very enjoyable. They're entertaining. Spider-Man: Far From Home, I watched it in the cinema, surround sound. It was fine. It was escapist. It wasn't a great story, but it was fun. I watched it. It was cool. I don't want to diss those stories. They can be great stories, but for me, a great story is when I leave the cinema and I have been granted a new way of looking at the world. And I leave the cinema and I'm like, I've got some insight into how to behave in the world in a different way that I had when I walked in, which could be an insight into a character's behavior. They're behaving in a way that is interesting, complex. I can't quite understand what they're doing, but I'm gonna leave the cinema in a way that shows me a different way of being in the world. That for me is a really great story. It's like we learn from stories, I think. We learn how to behave in the world in stories. So if the story is teaching me something new about the world and my place in it, fantastic. And you don't have to do that by preaching. So The Godfather is clearly a great story. Michael Corleone's motivations are really complex, and so complex that we question our own motivations. Like his motivation, he'll claim, is family is the most important thing to him. But at the end of the three movies, his wife's left him, she's had an abortion, he's killed his brother, and his daughter's died in front of him. So he's no family. There's a great scene in the second one, I think, where he's sitting at the table and he's insisting on something. Everyone leaves until he's alone at the table. There is no family around anymore. So we're learning something about our own desires and our own drives and our own, and we look at that and we go like, okay, he clearly wanted this, but he got this. In my own life, what do I want? And am I getting that? So there's movies that question our own complexities as human beings. Those for me are great stories. They're few and far between, but again, I don't know why I seem to be in the 70s, but that often is where I am when we talk about great stories. But I think, although I don't know Raging Bull, whether that was 70s, but Raging Bull is another one of these stories where you just like, they're complex characters and they're flawed and they're interesting, and we leave there going like, that was perfect. Like, don't change a scene. But you looked into this character's life, and now you've given me something in my own life, and I've resonated in some way, there's a resonance word again, with the character on the screen, because it's a kind of a real portrayal of a person struggling with life without clear answers. And then we leave going, And then our dealings with other people might be affected by that, because we don't know what this person's been going through, So it's like, so I don't know if that answers the question about what makes a great story, because I'm not telling you it needs to have 3-act structure, it needs to have this and this and this, but it needs, when I leave the cinema, I want to leave the cinema a changed person in some way. I mean, that's my goal, ideally, yeah.
And going back to the clerk analogy, I actually had another positive experience where the clerk said, oh yeah, hey, how's your day going? And I said, oh, great, sorry, I spaced. I'm still thinking about the movie I just saw. Oh, so that amazing. Right there tells you amazing. That it's affecting you 20 minutes later when you're going to...
And sometimes the stories... Cinema has that ability. You're going into a darkened space for like an hour or two. It has all the chances in the world to affect your life. And you can just put someone in the world and you leave that cinema going, oh wow, I love that space. It's my favorite space. Where you leave and you carry the movie with you. It's great.
Right, and you can also see, there was a movie I saw where I felt so bad for this woman. She was really crying during the, just really breaking down. Jeez. And I think it affected her after the film. And I just let her be, and I'm not trying to stare at her and make her feel bad, but I felt how affected she was about this one scene. And it was probably because something similar had just happened, and I was like, wow, that's amazing. That's amazing, I hope she's okay.
It's a powerful medium, and I think we have to be careful, because okay, I'm gonna go here because you can cut this off, but sometimes my students have, or people that write that I've been working with, they'll write a scene often of domestic abuse because it's an issue that people are we don't talk about it enough because it happens. The silence around it is a problem, but it happens, and sometimes people write it in a movie, but they'll write it in such a way, and then maybe the movie gets made and it gets portrayed in such a way. I always say to them, what about the abuser in the cinema and the abused woman in the cinema? How are they going to feel about this? And then even the worst for me is rape scenes, because there are a lot of them in movies. And how is a rapist going to feel in the cinema, or a woman who's been raped? Because I think we have to think about these questions, because I think if we want to reach the person whose life we want to either support or change, so I'm talking about the rapist in the room or the victim of abuse, we have to speak to those people and we have to be sensitive about what we're doing. And if you're having a scene where the guy's taking a woman's head and smashing it into a wall, Tarantino, what are you saying with that? What are you communicating? What's the person sitting there feeling? What they're feeling? What emotions are they feeling at that moment? Are they feeling like, yeah? It's a scary thought, but I do believe we carry that much power. So I don't know where that came from, but it came from the woman who was affected by the scene in the movie that you were talking about. This is what we're dealing with, actually. We're dealing with a very powerful medium that can affect people. And so we have to ask ourselves that without, again, paralyzing ourselves. Almost ask yourself that question and go deeper into it. Okay, this is what's going to happen in the scene, and this is what I'm going to show. And these are the images that I'm going to put on the back of people's retinas and in their brains for the rest of their lives. And whether you like it or not, you got that in your brain from me. I don't know. I find there's a responsibility there. With great power comes great responsibility. Anyway, maybe.
Right. Yeah, I was just thinking of some quote, and I don't know who said it, but artists are the most dangerous because they have the power to.
Wow. Yeah, this is in Plato's The Republic. The artists are the first ones that he kicks out because he's like, no, got to control. He wants to control the society, create the perfect society. Artists, painters, out, get out, banished. So we see it everywhere. Any authoritative regime will crack down on the artists and the journalists.